The microphone felt cold in my hand as my daughter-in-law smiled and lifted it on my birthday. As I steadied my fingers on the stem, I didn't react, just breathed, while her words landed like a quiet cut. While the hum of the room faded, that microphone seemed louder, carrying every insult she wrapped in sweetness. The same weight sat in my palm as I realized this wasn't a toast. It was a public claim of control. That's when it became clear she wasn't trying to hurt me, she was trying to shrink me. Still holding that microphone, I decided my response wouldn't be loud, just permanent. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The restaurant smelled like rosemary and warm bread, expensive comfort. James had insisted on this place, the kind with linen napkins and candlelight that made everyone sit a little straighter. I told myself it was just a birthday dinner, not a test of who still belonged. 58. I stepped into the private room and let the sound hit me first. Laughter, glasses clinking, a jazz trio tucked in the corner like a secret. A long table ran down the center with pale peonies and framed photos of me at different ages. In one, I was young and windburned at Ocean Beach. In another, I stood behind James at his kindergarten graduation, hands on his shoulders, wedding ring flashing under fluorescent lights. I didn't miss Chloe's eyes landing on that photo a beat too long. "Mom!" James crossed the room and kissed my cheek. His smile was real, but his shoulders were tight, like he'd been holding something up all day. "You look amazing." "You look like you're about to negotiate a hostage situation," I said lightly, smoothing his jacket like I used to. He laughed, then glanced over my shoulder. Chloe appeared a moment later, polished to a shine. Cream dress, perfect hair, perfect posture. She kissed the air near my cheek, close enough to perform, far enough to avoid contact. "Olivia," she said, as if we were co-workers. "Chloe." I kept my voice warm on purpose. "Sophia saved me." She ran in and wrapped her arms around my waist. "Grandma." "There's my girl," I said, kissing the top of her head. She smelled like strawberry shampoo in excitement. "She's allowed one soda," Chloe announced over Sophia's shoulder, too loud for the moment. Like the room needed to be reminded who made the rules. I straightened and scanned the guests. Helen waved from the far end, already watching Chloe the way you watch a stove you don't trust. Peter stood near the bar mid-story, hands moving like punctuation. People had come. People who'd loved me before I was James's mom, and long before I became the widow. As we made the rounds, the compliments started. "Olivia, you're glowing." 58? No way. You've always had such a presence. Each time someone said it, Chloe's smile tightened by a millimeter. She laughed a little too brightly at jokes. She slipped her hand onto James's arm whenever attention drifted away from her, as if he might be carried off by the current. When I told a story about James calling me every day his first week away at college, Chloe cut in with a sweet laugh. "He was just anxious back then. He's much healthier now." "Healthier." James's jaw flexed. He opened his mouth, then closed it, like he couldn't decide which side hurt less to disappoint. I kept my smile. Not because it didn't sting because it did, but because I'd learned grief already takes enough from you. I wasn't handing Chloe my dignity on a platter, too. Dinner moved on. Wine loosened tongues. Old friends leaned close to tell me I deserved happiness. I deserved peace. Chloe listened like those words were being stolen from her. Then the manager arrived with a microphone. "Before we bring out the cake," he announced, "a few words from the family." James pushed his chair back, but Chloe stood first. She smoothed her dress, took the microphone, and turned toward me with a smile so bright it looked sharp. "I just want to say," she began, voice clear enough to hush the room. "Tonight is about celebrating everything Olivia has managed to hold on to." Helen's hand found my elbow. James went pale, and Chloe lifted her glass toward me like this was a toast, when something in her eyes told me it was anything but. Chloe kept the microphone like it was part of her jewelry, another accessory meant to catch light and attention. The candle flames trembled in the draft of people shifting, uncomfortable but trapped by politeness. "Everything Olivia has managed to hold on to." she repeated, and her smile flashed bright enough to look harmless if you didn't know what teeth looked like behind glass. James's shoulders tightened beside her. He leaned in, murmuring something I couldn't hear, a warning only a husband would try. Chloe didn't even glance at him. She patted his forearm soft. Possessive, then turned back to me like the room was a stage, and I was the prop she'd finally decided to use. "It's not easy," she continued, voice sweet. "Accepting that seasons change, that children grow up, that a wife becomes the family." A few guests exchanged quick looks. Someone set a wine glass down too carefully. The jazz trio stayed silent, as if even their instruments were holding their breath. Helen's hand found my elbow again, steady, protective. I felt her ready to rise, ready to end this if I gave her the slightest signal. I stayed calm. Not because it didn't sting, because Chloe wanted it to sting out loud. Chloe angled her face toward me, lowering her voice just enough to feel intimate, while still broadcasting the humiliation. "After what you've been through," she said, "it makes sense. You'd cling to what you have left." That word cling landed hard. My throat tightened. Across the room, Sophia's small face had gone still, her eyes wide like she'd wandered into a grown-up problem with no exit. I stood slowly, the chair legs whispering against the floor, not to challenge Chloe, just to remind myself I still took up space. Chloe's gaze flicked down and back up, measuring me the way she measured everything. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes sharpened, impatient. "This is my birthday," I said softly. For half a second, she looked almost startled, as if she'd forgotten the setting in her rush to win. Then her jaw firmed. She set the microphone down on the table with a gentle thunk. Too gentle, like she'd planned the sound. "Exactly," she said, and stepped closer. "So don't ruin it." Her hand came up fast. The slap wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was real clean and sharp, the kind of sound that doesn't echo so much as stop time. Heat bloomed across my cheek. My head turned slightly, just enough to make the world tilt at the edges. Silence fell like a curtain. No one moved. No one breathed normally. Even the kitchen noise beyond the doors seemed to vanish. I tasted metal blood from where my teeth had caught the inside of my mouth. My fingers twitched toward my face, but I didn't touch it. I refused to rub away what she'd done like it was dirt I'd earned. James rushed in, hands hovering near my shoulders, panicked. "Mom, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Chloe, what are you—" I lifted one hand between us. A small gesture, a boundary. "James," I said, quiet and steady. He froze, torn open by guilt. Chloe stood there with her chin lifted, a faint smirk forming as if she'd finally forced me into the role she'd written, hurt. Small, reactive. I straightened my spine. I lifted my chin. And then I did the one thing she hadn't prepared for. I smiled. Not sweetly, not politely, calmly, like I'd just seen the game board clearly for the first time. Her smirk faltered. I held her gaze and let the silence do the work. Then I said, soft enough that the whole room leaned in without realizing it, "Is that all you've got?" Chloe blinked once, hard like she'd been struck back. And at the far end of the table, I saw Peter's expression shift from shock to something cold and precise, as if he'd just watched a line get crossed that could never be uncrossed. For a few long seconds, my smile was the only thing in that room that made sense. It wasn't joy. It wasn't forgiveness. It was the face you learn to wear when life has already taken the easy reactions from you, when grief has emptied you out in private, and what's left is a quiet steadiness people don't know how to handle. Chloe's hand lowered, slowly, like she'd just remembered there were witnesses. The air stayed frozen. Guests stared at me as if they were waiting for the real show to begin, tears, screaming, a scene that would let them relax because it would be familiar. Instead, I stood there with my chin up, cheek burning, and a calm smile that refused to cooperate with Chloe's script. Sound returned in tiny pieces. A chair leg scraping. Someone's breath catching. A fork tapping a plate and stopping immediately. Then whispers soft and horrified, like nobody wanted to be the first to admit what they'd seen. Chloe's mouth tried to hold its smug shape, But it wavered when she looked around, because the faces weren't on her side. They weren't amused. They weren't neutral. They were sympathetic toward me. The kind of sympathy that doesn't need words, the kind that quietly labels someone else as the problem. Helen's hand stayed on my elbow, steady as a handrail. Peter's eyes had gone cold and focused, the way they probably did when a client finally told him the truth. Across the table, Sophia sat motionless, little hands clasped together so tight her knuckles had gone pale. When her eyes found mine, they looked wet and frightened, as if she was waiting to see whether adults could still be trusted. I softened my smile just for her. I'm okay. You're okay. James hovered at my side, shaking with the urge to fix something he'd already let break. Mom, he whispered, voice ragged. I'm so sorry. I didn't think she would, I swear. I lifted my hand, a small stop sign between us. James, I said. Not sharp, just firm. He fell silent instantly. That hurt more than the slap, how fast he still listened to me, and how long he'd let things get to this point. I'm fine, I told him quietly. Not here. His eyes flicked to my cheek. You're not fine. I am, I said again, and kept my smile. Take care of Sophia. That landed. His gaze snapped toward his daughter, and I watched the guilt deepen, turning from husband guilt into father guilt. Chloe's eyes followed the exchange, and for the first time she looked unsure of her footing, like she'd wanted a victory over me, and hadn't considered the cost would be visible to everyone, especially a 10-year-old. Chloe tried to salvage it. Olivia, she said, voice too controlled. Don't be dramatic. I didn't answer. Silence is a mirror. It forces people to look at what they've done without the comfort of an argument to hide behind. And in that mirror, Chloe stood alone. I stepped away. Not rushing, not fleeing, just walking, as if my body belonged to me and not to the moment she'd tried to steal. Helen moved with me immediately. James started after us, then stopped when I lifted my hand behind me without looking. The private room door clicked shut behind us, muffling the party into a distant hum. The hallway smelled like lemon cleanser and expensive perfume. My cheek pulsed with my heartbeat, but my breath came slow and even. Helen leaned close. Olivia, she murmured, do you want me to call the police? Before I could answer, Peter appeared at my other side, expression precise, already filing details away like evidence. He looked at my face, then met my eyes. Tell me what you want to do, he said softly, because what she just did changes everything. Behind the closed door, Chloe let out a thin, forced laugh, trying to stitch the night back together. And in that laugh, I heard it. Fear. I stayed in the hallway long enough for the sting in my cheek to become a steady throb instead of a shock. Helen kept looking at my face like she could smooth the moment out with her eyes. Peter stood a half step back, quiet, watching me the way he watched contracts waiting for the exact choice. Not the police, I said softly. Not tonight. Helen's mouth opened, then closed. She knew the difference between fear and timing. Peter nodded once. All right, but you call me if you change your mind. When I pushed the door open again, the room hadn't recovered, it had just rearranged itself around what happened. The party technically continued. Voices rose. Laughter returned, but it sounded forced, like people were trying to prove they could still be normal. A joke landed too loudly, then died. Someone clinked a glass and immediately stopped. The servers moved in and out with smooth, practiced faces, pretending this was just another table with a little tension. Chloe had drifted back to the center, as if she could reclaim the night, by standing in the right spot. She hovered near the cake table, smiling too brightly, talking in quick bursts to anyone who'd listen. Oh, you know families, she chirped to a couple near the bar. Big emotions. Olivia's just sensitive. Sensitive. The word was meant to shrink me, but the room didn't follow her lead. People kept looking at me. Not openly, not dramatically. Side glances. Soft eyes. The kind of attention that isn't pity so much as a quiet verdict. They weren't sure what to do with Chloe now, but they knew what they'd seen. I walked to my seat and sat down like nothing had changed. I accepted a glass of water from a server, and took a measured sip, letting my hands stay steady on the table. My cheek burned. My mouth still tasted faintly of copper, but I refused to touch my face. Refused to give Chloe the satisfaction of seeing me tend to the wound she'd made. Helen slid into the chair beside me, shoulder brushing mine. "Are you sure you're okay?" she whispered. "Not okay," I murmured back. "Just present." Across the room, James stood with Sophia, one hand resting on his daughter's shoulder like an anchor. Sophia kept glancing at me, as if checking whether I'd vanished. When our eyes met, I gave her a small nod. Her shoulders eased, just a little. James started toward me, guilt written all over his face. "Mom?" he began, reaching for my hand. I turned my palm over on the table, just out of reach. Not cruel, careful. His fingers stopped in midair, and he swallowed his apology like it was glass. "Later," I said quietly. He nodded once, relief and shame mixing in his eyes, and stepped back to his daughter. Chloe noticed the exchange immediately. She crossed the room with a controlled stride, smile pinned on but working too hard. "Olivia," she said brightly, stopping beside my chair. "Are you enjoying yourself now?" Nearby, conversations faltered. A few people suddenly found their napkins fascinating. I set my glass down gently. Then I looked up at her, calm as still water. "I'm here," I said. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't approval. It was just fact. Chloe's smile twitched. "Good," she said too fast. "Because I really don't want any misunderstandings." Misunderstandings, as if her hand had flown across my face by accident. She pivoted away, laughter spilling out in a brittle little stream as she tried to stitch the room back together. But the more she worked for it, the more it slipped. Guests drifted toward my table with quiet offers. "Do you need anything? Can I get you home?" And each kindness felt like another thread pulled from Chloe's control. I watched her realize it. Her eyes sharpened. Her jaw tightened. Her cheerfulness became louder, more desperate. Helen leaned close. "You're going to let her walk away from this?" "I'm not confronting her tonight," I whispered. Helen's breath caught. "But it's coming," I added, eyes fixed on Chloe. Across the room, Chloe turned and caught me watching. The smile finally dropped from her face, replaced by something raw and irritated. She reached for the microphone again, this time not like jewelry, like a weapon. The bruise didn't appear all at once. It bloomed slowly, like a secret deciding it was tired of being kept. The morning after my birthday, I stood in my bathroom with the lights too bright and watched the colors spread along my jaw, pink to purple, soft to undeniable. I reached for concealer out of habit, then stopped halfway. I wasn't hiding it for Chloe. I was hiding it for Sophia. My phone buzzed on the counter. First James. "Mom, please, let me come over." Then Chloe, a minute later, as if she couldn't tolerate silence. "We should talk. Privately. Women to women." I stared at the words until they felt like hands on my shoulders. Women to women wasn't an olive branch. It was a leash. "Let me manage you. Let me contain this before it costs me." I set the phone face down and poured coffee I barely tasted. That became the pattern over the next few days. Chloe reached for control the way some people reach for oxygen. She sent cheerful group texts about Sophia's piano recital. She forwarded a picture from their Napa trip, a caption full of hearts, like a bandage slapped over a wound. When I didn't respond, her tone shifted. A voicemail came through on day 2. Her voice was soft, almost wounded. "Olivia, I'm worried about you," she said, as if concern erased what she'd done. "James is upset. Sophia is asking questions. We should clear the air." Clear the air like smoke disappears if you call it mist. I didn't call back. I did something I'd been postponing for years because it felt too final, too harsh, too much like admitting I needed protection from my own family. I called Peter. He answered on the second ring. "Olivia, I need to see you," I said. "Today?" His voice didn't carry surprise. It carried readiness. "Yes." When I walked into his office that afternoon, the quiet hit me like relief. No candlelight, no performance, just shelves of law books and the faint smell of paper and coffee. Peter took one look at my face and didn't ask me to relive anything. He slid a legal pad toward me. Tell me what you want protected. I thought of my home, the garden my husband had planted, the life I'd built brick by brick. I thought of Chloe's eyes when she realized the room wasn't on her side, and the way irritation had looked like hunger. Everything, I said. And I want it so she can never use it against me. Peter nodded once. Then we do this carefully. He explained options in plain language. Revise the will. Set up a trust. Update beneficiaries. Medical directives paperwork that sounded boring until you realized it was armor. I didn't sign anything that day, but I gave him permission to start preparing. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. Chloe. James is coming by. I told him you'd appreciate it. She hadn't asked. She'd decided. I drove home anyway, then detoured to the park where Sophia liked to feed ducks. I'd told James I needed space, but I'd also told him Sophia could see me whenever she wanted. He arrived after school looking exhausted. Sophia ran ahead, backpack bouncing, and stopped in front of me with a seriousness that didn't belong on a 10-year-old. "Grandma," she whispered. I knelt and smiled gently. "Hey, Lily." I said my old nickname for her, from when she was tiny and stubborn and bright. Her eyes flicked to my cheek. She didn't ask what happened. She just hugged me hard, like she was trying to protect me back. That night, after Sophia fell asleep on my couch with her shoes still on, James sat across from me, hands clasped. "Mom, Chloe says you're punishing us." "I'm protecting myself," I said. "And I'm protecting your daughter from thinking that behavior is normal." He flinched. He left quietly, carrying Sophia to the car like she was something precious he'd almost dropped. An hour later, Peter called. "Olivia," he said, voice calm but sharp underneath. "I started reviewing your existing documents. There's something you need to know." My stomach tightened. "What?" "Someone attempted to request a beneficiary. Change form last month," he said. "It wasn't completed, but the request exists in the system." My hand went cold around the phone. "Who?" Peter paused just long enough to make the answer hit. It was initiated from an email address tied to Chloe. Peter didn't say, "I told you so." He let the silence sit after he mentioned Chloe's email long enough for the shock to cool into something harder. "Can you prove it was her?" I asked. "We can prove the request came from an address tied to her name," he said. "That's leverage, even if she tries to play innocent." Leverage. I'd spent most of my life trying not to need it. He slid a folder across his desk. My life was inside it. Property records, account summaries, beneficiary designations. The will I'd written years ago when I still believed family meant safety by default. Turning those pages felt like touching bones. "Here's what we do," Peter said, calm and surgical. "We revise your estate plan. We make it airtight. You decide exactly who gets what, when, and under what conditions. No ambiguity." "Meaning Chloe can't touch anything," I said. "Meaning no one can," he corrected. "Unless you allow it." That was the first relief I'd felt since the slap, not comfort, exactly, but structure. A fence where there hadn't been one. We talked for an hour. Trusts, updated beneficiaries, medical directives, powers of attorney. Layers that sounded boring until you realized boring could be protection. Peter explained it like he was building a lock and handing me the key. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote Sophia's name at the top of a legal pad. Then I crossed it out and wrote Lily instead, the private name I used when she was small and fierce, and still believed I could fix everything. I didn't want her future tied to the temperature of her parents' marriage. I didn't want Chloe ever dangling resources like a leash. So the next morning I told Peter I wanted a trust specifically for Sophia education. Therapy if she ever needed it. A start in life that didn't come with strings. "Who do you trust to manage it?" he asked. "Helen," I said instantly. "And you?" "I'll do it," he replied. 2 trustees is smart. 2 days later, Peter set me up with a financial advisor, Marisol Ortiz, in a glassy office near the Embarcadero. Marisol didn't speak to me like I was fragile. She spoke to me like I was in charge. "We can restructure assets," she said, pulling up a screen. "Move certain accounts into vehicles that are harder to tamper with. Update beneficiaries across the board. Add extra authorization. 2-factor on everything." And set alerts if anyone tries to initiate changes again. You'll know immediately. I stared at the numbers, suddenly seeing Chloe's face behind them. Do it, I said. Signing the paperwork felt like drawing a line with ink instead of anger. Quiet. Permanent. The kind of power that doesn't need a microphone. On my way out, James texted. Mom, Chloe says you're shutting her out. She keeps asking what you're doing. Please don't do something that blows up the family. I read it twice and felt the familiar twist. If I defended myself, I was the threat. If Chloe crossed a line, it was big emotions. I typed back carefully. I'm handling things. I love you. Sophia comes first. We'll talk soon. I didn't mention Peter. I didn't mention Marisol. I didn't mention the fact that I was building a future Chloe couldn't reach. Because the plan wasn't just legal, it was emotional. Chloe wanted a public fight, tears, yelling, a messy confrontation she could reframe later. I wasn't giving her that. I was choosing a moment that would be clean, controlled, and unforgettable. Then Friday came school pickup. Chloe arrived in sunglasses and a bright smile, greeting other parents like she was hosting brunch. Her laughter was too loud, her charm too practiced. When she saw me across the sidewalk, her smile froze. A mother beside her followed her gaze, then looked back at Chloe, then at me, eyes dipping, just briefly, to my cheek. Chloe's laugh hitched. She smoothed her hair too fast. Olivia, she called, voice too bright. What a surprise! I walked up calmly and looked past her to Sophia, who lit up the second she saw me. Hi, Lily, I said. Chloe's eyes flicked to the other parents calculating. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down, and whatever she read drained the color from her face. By the time I got home from school pickup, fog had rolled in, softening the streetlights into halos. My cheek still ached under makeup like it was keeping its own record. I made tea I didn't want, just to keep my hands calm, then opened the folder Peter had dropped off that morning, thick, neatly tabbed. My name printed cleanly on the front. Paper doesn't look like power until you've been powerless. I texted Chloe one sentence. Come by tonight. Just you. We need to talk. Her reply came almost instantly. Fine. 7:30. No apology, no question. Just a time slot. Like she was granting me an appointment. At 7:28, my doorbell rang. Chloe walked in the way she always did, heels measured, posture straight, chin lifted, as if the air owed her respect. Navy blazer, sleek hair, lipstick perfect. Control dressed up as normalcy. She didn't look at my cheek. She didn't ask about Sophia. She scanned my living room like she was evaluating a property. Olivia, she said crisply. I have limited time. Of course you do. I gestured to the armchair across from me. Sit. She hovered for a moment, arms loosely crossed, then lowered herself onto the edge of the chair like she was ready to spring up and turn this into a dramatic exit. So, she said, what is this? Because you've been distant. Like I'd simply wandered off. I sat first slow, deliberate, then set the folder on the coffee table between us. Her eyes tracked it. What's that? A gift, I said. A faint curl touched her mouth. I don't need gifts from you. That's good, I replied, because this one isn't for you to enjoy. Her smile slipped. Cute. I opened the folder and slid the top page toward her, stopping it right in front of her manicured nails. Chloe glanced down, then back up, irritation sharpening. What am I looking at? My updated estate plan? I said calmly. Trust documents, beneficiary updates, medical directives. Her eyes narrowed. Why are you showing me that? Because you need to understand something, I said, voice even. You don't get to put your hands on me and then put your hands on my life. Chloe let out a small, dismissive laugh. Olivia, you're being dramatic. I didn't react. I let the word fall dead between us. You've always loved control, I continued. Over rooms, over people, over what gets said and what doesn't. But you miscalculated. Her gaze flashed. I didn't miscalculate anything. I tapped the folder lightly. You did. Because you assumed I'd keep playing the same role, quiet, accommodating, afraid of making things worse. I'm not doing that anymore. Chloe leaned back, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. And what? You think paperwork scares me? No, I said. I think it bores you, which is why you're dangerous with it. That landed. The laugh vanished. I kept my voice gentle, almost conversational. Everything I own is now structured so you can never access it. The house, the accounts, the investments, locked. My directives locked. And Sophia's future is secured through a trust you can't control. At Sophia's name, something flickered in Chloe's face, not tenderness, calculation. You can't do that, she snapped. James doesn't control my assets. I cut in, still calm. And neither do you. Her cheeks flushed. You're punishing me. I'm protecting myself, I said, and my smile returned small, steady. And I'm protecting Sophia from ever learning this is normal. Chloe reached for the document like she could snatch the reality away, but I held the folder steady. I slid it fully toward her. That's the gift, I said. A clean ending to the fantasy that you can humiliate me and still benefit from me. Chloe grabbed the folder, flipping pages too fast to read. Her breathing sharpened. This is insane. James will hear about this. I'm counting on it, I said. And when he asks, I'll tell him the truth, calmly, with dates. She shot up so fast the chair scraped. Fury brightened her face, but under it I saw panic. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down. The color drained out of her cheeks. She looked up at me, voice suddenly low. What did you do? She whispered. Chloe didn't leave my house like someone who'd lost. She left like someone who couldn't believe the rules had changed without her permission. She snapped the folder shut, shoved it into her tote, and strode to the door with her phone still lit in her hand, thumb hovering over the screen, like she could rewind whatever message had drained her face. At the threshold, she turned back, eyes sharp and wet at the same time. You think you're clever, she said. I think I'm done, I replied. That was all it took. She couldn't find a sentence clean enough to win, so she did what she always did when she couldn't dominate the room. She went to find a new one. Through the window, I watched her stand in my driveway, shoulders rigid, tapping her phone hard enough to bruise the glass. Then she lifted it to her ear and started talking before anyone could even say hello. James. I rinsed my teacup, letting the water run longer than it needed to. It wasn't avoidance, it was grounding. One ordinary act after another until my body remembered I was safe in my own home. When the sink finally went quiet, the house felt different. Not emptier, quieter. My phone rang 20 minutes later. James's name lit up the screen, and I stared at it for a beat, feeling that familiar ache of loving someone who could be grown and helpless at the same time. Hi, I said when I answered. His voice was low, exhausted. Chloe's furious. I assumed. She says you're trying to destroy our family, he said, then hesitated. She says you humiliated her. I leaned against the counter and looked at my reflection in the dark window, the faint shadow beneath my cheekbone. I didn't touch her, I said softly. I didn't raise my voice. I protected myself. James exhaled, long and shaky. She keeps talking, and I don't know what to say anymore. That was the first honest thing he'd said since my birthday. Then don't say anything, I told him. Listen, think, and keep Sophia out of it. His voice tightened. She's already asking why Mom's mad. I know, I said. Bring her to me this weekend if you can. A pause. Chloe won't like that. I'm not asking what Chloe likes, I replied, and I heard how unfamiliar firmness sounded in my own mouth. The weekend came anyway. Sophia arrived Saturday morning with a backpack and cautious eyes, like she expected my house to feel tense now too. The second she saw me, she relaxed enough to step into my arms. I held her longer than usual, feeling her small heartbeat, the warm weight of her trust. We made pancakes, messy ones with too many blueberries because she insisted more is better. She laughed when batter landed on my sleeve, and the sound loosened something inside my chest that had been clenched for weeks. At the park, she pumped her legs on the swing and asked me if ducks get tired of water. For a while, the world narrowed to sunlight, squeaking chains, and a child's voice. Peace didn't feel like a reward. It felt like a right. Sunday evening, James came to pick her up. He stood in my doorway like he didn't know whether he was allowed to be my son and a husband at the same time. "Mom," he said carefully, "can we talk?" On the porch, he rubbed his forehead. "Chloe wants me to talk you into undoing it." "No," I said, simple. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "So that's it?" "That's it," I confirmed. "You can love your wife. You can protect your daughter. But you don't get to ask me to accept abuse to make your life easier." His throat bobbed. He nodded, slow. Over the next few days, Chloe tried to mend things with him. Sweet texts. Smiling photos online. Talk of a fresh start weekend away. James told me later, flatly, "It feels like marketing." When marketing didn't work, frustration took its place. Wednesday night after 9, James called again. His voice was hollow. "Mom, Chloe says if you don't fix what you did, she's filing something tomorrow." My stomach tightened. "Filing what?" "I don't know," he admitted. "She won't tell me. She just said I'd better be on the right side." And I realized Chloe wasn't done trying to control the story. She was just switching weapons. The next morning, I woke to a quiet that felt earned sunlight on the kitchen tile, the soft tick of the clock I'd almost replaced after my husband died. Time moving forward, whether I begged it to or not. By 10, the quiet was gone. A bouquet arrived at my door. White lilies, expensive, arranged like a peace offering that could be photographed. The card wasn't signed with love. "Let's move forward." For Sophia, Chloe, I didn't bring them inside. I left them on the porch where the fog could have them. Then came a gift basket. Then an email with a polished subject line. "Reset." Then a text that tried to sound humble, like she'd borrowed the voice from a therapist's Instagram post. "I'm taking accountability." I crossed a line. "I want to repair this." Accountability from Chloe always came with an invisible invoice. I didn't answer. Silence was the first boundary she couldn't negotiate. At lunch, Helen met me at a cafe near Fillmore and watched me stir my tea. "People are talking," she said. I assumed they would. "Not about you losing it," she replied. "About you not losing it." She leaned in, eyes bright with something like satisfaction. "They're calling it brave." I felt a strange flicker in my chest. I hadn't been trying to be brave. I'd been trying to stay standing. But I understood what she meant. Everyone expected the older woman to smooth things over for everyone else's comfort. And I hadn't. Across town, Chloe tried to stitch her reputation back together with the same tools she'd always used: smiles, charm, control. It wasn't working. At school pickup, other parents smiled at Chloe and then looked past her to ask me, quietly, if I was okay. A mutual friend who used to like every one of Chloe's posts stopped interacting entirely. Conversations shifted. Invitations shifted. Chloe could feel it in the air, and her laugh started coming out too bright, too sharp. James could feel it too. He came by one evening with shadows under his eyes like he'd been sleeping in 5-minute pieces. He didn't sit right away. He stood in my doorway the way he used to as a teenager when he'd done something wrong and didn't know which punishment would hurt less. "She's watching everything I do," he said. I nodded. "She's afraid." James flinched. "She says you're turning people against her." "I'm not turning anyone," I said. "I'm just not performing for her anymore." He swallowed, gaze drifting to the photo on my shelf, him at 10, missing front teeth. His arm around my waist like I was the safest place on earth. "I didn't think it would get this bad," he admitted. "It got this bad the moment she realized she could do it in public," I said. "And you wouldn't stop it." His eyes shut briefly. "I know. No, but no excuse. Just the truth." 2 days later, Chloe called from a number I didn't recognize. When I didn't answer, she left a voicemail that sounded like she was speaking through her teeth. "Olivia, we can do this the easy way," she said. "Or the hard way. But either way, I'm not going to be shut out. Easy way. Hard way. Like I was a door she could kick in." That night, James texted, She won't tell me what she filed. She just keeps saying tomorrow. I slept anyway. Not peacefully, deliberately. I refused to let her dictate my body. Tomorrow arrived at 8:14 a.m. with a knock. A man stood on my porch holding a clipboard. Not a neighbor, not a delivery. Olivia Stevens? He asked. Yes, I said, voice steady. He handed me an envelope and said, like he'd said it 1,000 times, "You've been served." Inside, the first page hit like ice. Petition for temporary restraining order. Request for conservatorship evaluation. I read that second line twice. Chloe wasn't just trying to punish me. She was trying to brand me unstable, block me from Sophia, and put my life under someone else's control. My phone buzzed in my hand. Peter calling. Like he already knew. I answered, and before I could speak, he said, "Olivia, don't panic. Read me the heading." I stared at the paper, cheek pulsing like a warning, and realized the fight Chloe wanted wasn't emotional anymore. It was legal. Peter had me in his office an hour after I was served, the envelope still stiff in my purse like a live thing. He spread the papers across his desk and read them the way surgeons read, scans, quiet, precise, already planning the cut. "She's asking for a temporary restraining order," he said, tapping one page. "And she's trying to trigger a conservatorship evaluation. That second one is the real play. To take control," I murmured. "To suggest you can't control yourself," he corrected gently. "It's a smear with legal teeth." My stomach rolled, but my voice stayed steady. "What do we do?" "We respond fast," Peter said. "And we respond clean. Evidence, witnesses, timeline. And I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Live normally," he said. "Don't hide. Don't spiral. People like Chloe rely on you looking unstable." So I went home and did the most ordinary thing I could think of. I swept my kitchen floor. Then I scheduled a routine checkup with my doctor. Nothing dramatic, just a timestamp that said stable. I printed photos from Sophia's last visit and tucked them into a drawer like they were something sacred I couldn't afford to lose. Chloe's attempts to regain control came in waves. Emails from a concerned mother. Messages that referenced my grief. A call to my neighbor asking if I'd been confused lately. Each move was slicker than the last. Each one left fingerprints. And she kept failing, because people had seen her. Helen forwarded me a text from a woman in our circle, someone who attended Chloe's charity events like they were church. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm with Olivia." That was horrifying. Chloe's power had always depended on a room full of people willing to pretend. Now the pretending was over. James started showing up more, too. At first it was practical, dropping off documents Peter requested, picking up Sophia's jacket she'd left at my place. Then it became quiet, lingering. A coffee on my porch, a long stare at nothing. One afternoon, he finally said, "She wanted me to sign something." My chest tightened. "What kind of something?" "A statement," he admitted, shame flooding his face. "About you being unstable since Dad passed. She said it would help the court understand." I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at my son until he couldn't look away from what he'd said. "I didn't sign it," he added fast, like he needed to save himself in my eyes. "Good," I said. "Because if you had, you'd be teaching your daughter that lies are tools." His eyes went wet. "I don't know who she is right now." I believed him. And for the first time, I saw him stop trying to balance and start trying to stand. 2 days later, Chloe reached out directly, no flowers, no glossy subject lines. A voicemail. Her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Olivia, can we meet? Please. 5 minutes. I want to fix this." I agreed on my terms. Public place, daytime. Helen nearby. Peter aware. Chloe arrived at the cafe looking like she'd slept in her makeup, still perfect, but tight at the edges. She sat across from me with both hands wrapped around her cup like she needed it to keep from shaking. "I didn't want it to go this far," she said. "That's not what the paperwork says," I replied calmly. Her eyes flashed, then softened again. "Sophia needs peace." "So do I said. "If you drop your changes," she tried, voice turning careful, "I'll withdraw." No, I interrupted. Gentle but final. My dignity isn't a bargaining chip, and my safety isn't up for negotiation. For a moment, her face went empty, no charm, no superiority, just the realization that I wasn't moving. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. You don't, I said. You live with what you chose. She stood and walked out without looking back. A minute later, my phone buzzed. Peter. Hearing. Date set. And Olivia, she just filed an amended petition. It names James as a supporting witness. I stared at the screen until the words hardened into something dangerous. Because Chloe wasn't retreating. She was trying to drag my son down with her. I didn't call James back right away. Not because I didn't love him. Because love, I was learning, didn't mean I had to sprint toward every crisis someone else lit on fire. I set my phone face down on the kitchen table and stood at the window, watching fog drift between the houses like a slow eraser. Somewhere down the block, a car door shut. A dog barked once. Ordinary life kept moving, indifferent to court dates and petitions and the way one slap could crack a family's foundation. In the sink, a bowl soaked with dried pancake batter from Sophia's last visit. I rolled up my sleeves and washed it. Warm water. Simple motion. There was something almost holy about doing one ordinary thing after another. My hands had spent years smoothing things over, cleaning up messes that weren't mine. Now I was cleaning because I chose to, not because someone demanded the world look tidy. When the bowl was clean and back in the cabinet, I opened the drawer and pulled the envelope out again. My name in neat black letters. I reread the heading until the words stopped feeling like a threat and started feeling like proof. Chloe had gone so far she'd exposed herself. That was the shift I hadn't expected. The more she tried to control me, the more visible her control became. I made a list for Peter dates, times, names, the restaurant, the bruise photos, the Easy Way voicemail, the flowers left on my porch like props, the neighbor she'd called. Each detail felt like a small stone, and I could feel myself building something solid out of what she'd meant to use against me. That afternoon, I walked to the little park near my house and sat on the uneven bench under the cypress tree where my husband and I used to drink coffee. The air off the bay cooled my skin. I let myself remember the first year after he died, how people treated my grief like glass, how decisions felt temporary because I didn't know who I was without him. Back then, Chloe's comments slipped under my skin more easily because I was already raw. I'd been tired, not weak. Tired wasn't permanent. My phone buzzed again. A long text from James, like he'd run out of ways to keep it tidy. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't stop it at your birthday. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I didn't sign anything. I won't lie about you. I don't know how to fix this. Please believe me. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. The apology landed like rain on dry ground, welcome, but not enough to erase the drought. I didn't answer yet. I took a screenshot and sent it to Peter. Not to punish James, to protect the truth. Over the next days, something strange happened in our circle. People stopped treating me like I was delicate. At Helen's house, over chili and cornbread, someone squeezed my hand and said, "I'm glad you didn't let her rewrite you." Another friend, a man who usually avoided drama like it was contagious, told me quietly, "I wish my sister had done what you did years ago." Praise has weight. I didn't know where to put it, but I felt my spine remember it was built to hold more than sorrow. Even James's cousins reached out offering to testify, offering support in their awkward ways. Not gossip, just quiet alignment. Chloe noticed too. Not because anyone confronted her, because the room stopped moving toward her. At Sophia's soccer practice, Chloe tried to act normal, cheering too loud, offering snacks, laughing with other parents. Her laughter floated and fell flat. People drifted away to tie shoes or check phones. I sat on the bleachers and watched Sophia run, ponytail swinging. She glanced at me once and smiled, small, private, steady. Chloe saw it. Her face tightened, then smoothed again. But the smoothing looked painful. After practice, Sophia ran to me first. Chloe followed, voice bright enough for nearby parents to hear. "Olivia, Sophia has a dentist appointment next week. I'll send you the details if you're up for it. The needle. The insinuation. I didn't react. I looked at Sophia and said, "Pick the sparkly toothbrush, Lily." Sophia giggled. A mom nearby met my eyes and gave me a tiny nod respect, not pity. That night James called, voice low. "She's packing a bag. She says if I don't support her at the hearing, she'll take Sophia to her sister's." My heart clenched, but my mind stayed steady. "James," I said, slow and clear, "decide what kind of father you are before she decides for you." He didn't answer, but in his silence, I heard him breathing like a man standing at the edge of a choice he couldn't step back from. The day after James went quiet on the phone, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't let Chloe's paperwork become the only story my life told. So I started small, almost insultingly small, considering the size of the mess around me. I pulled an old box from the back of my closet labeled ceramics in my husband's handwriting. Inside were dried-up brushes, a cracked apron, and a little coil of clay I'd bought years ago and never touched because there was always something more urgent. A bill, a school form, a dinner to smooth over, a woman to keep happy. I signed up for a beginner class in a studio off Valencia. The place smelled like wet earth and optimism. The first time I pressed my thumbs into clay, something in me exhaled. It didn't erase the legal threat. It didn't cancel the hearing. But it gave my hands a job that wasn't bracing for impact. After class, I walked home with gray smudges on my fingers and caught myself smiling at nothing. Not the calm, defiant smile I'd used on Chloe. A real one, private, unperformed. I reached out to people I'd lost without noticing. Friends from before my life became James's mom and then the widow. I texted Renee, a woman I used to work with years ago, expecting polite distance. She called immediately. "Where have you been?" she demanded, like the last decade was a hallway we could just walk back through. We met for lunch in North Beach, and I listened to her talk about her grown kids and her new fiancé and the chaos of learning to live alone after living for everyone else. She studied me across the table and said, "You have that look." What look? The look of a woman who finally stopped asking permission. It landed in me like a match. I started taking mornings back. I joined a walking group that met at the Presidio Strangers at first. Then friendly faces who didn't know my family drama and didn't need to. One of them, a retired nurse named Janice, taught me the names of trees I'd been passing for years without seeing. Another woman, Noor, invited me to a book club that actually talked about books instead of turning into a competition, somewhere between clay and long walks and laughter that didn't cost me anything. I realized the quiet in my house wasn't loneliness. It was freedom. Chloe, meanwhile, was slipping out of rooms the way a scent fades. Helen heard it from people who used to orbit her. Chloe stopped getting asked to lead things. Her charity committee duties got reassigned. A couple of mothers at Sophia's school suddenly had other plans when Chloe tried to corner them. The more she pushed, the less anyone moved. Control only works when people agree to be controlled. James kept trying to make amends in the awkward way men do when they can't fix something with a tool. He started leaving groceries at my door, my favorite tea, fresh oranges, that bread I liked from the bakery near my street. He sent short texts that didn't ask me to soothe him. "I'm sorry. I'm trying. I won't let her use Sophia." Sometimes I didn't answer. Sometimes I sent one line back. "Keep choosing your daughter." One Friday afternoon, he came by while I was unloading a small pottery piece from my car, a lopsided bowl, imperfect and mine. He stared at it like he didn't recognize this version of me. "You're doing stuff," he said, almost stunned. "I'm living," I replied. He nodded slowly, then swallowed. "The hearing's next week. Chloe's acting like she already won." I set the bowl carefully on my counter, feeling its weight, its steadiness. "Let her act," I said. "We'll show up with truth." James's phone buzzed in his hand. He checked it, and his face tightened. "It's her," he murmured. Then, quieter, "She says she has something that will end this." He looked up at me, eyes raw with fear and disbelief. "What could she possibly have left?" he asked. And in my chest, that old ache returned, not panic, but a warning. Because Chloe never came empty-handed. The first invitation came folded into my tote bag after pottery class, like it was trying not to scare me off. Noor caught me at the sink while I rinsed clay from my hands. "Hey," she said casually. "My friend runs this women's empowerment group. They do a monthly talk series, real stories. Not TED Talk fluff. I told her about you." I almost laughed. "About me?" "She'd love if you'd speak," Noor said, watching my face. "Only if you want. No pressure." Pressure had been Chloe's language for years. This didn't feel like that. This felt like someone offering me a chair at a table I'd forgotten I could sit at. My first instinct was to shrink. I'm not inspirational. I'm just surviving. Then I remembered the bruise, the paperwork, the way Chloe tried to turn my grief into a diagnosis. If she was willing to weaponize my story, then I could reclaim it. So I said yes. The event was in a bright community space near Hayes Valley, folding chairs, soft stage lights, a small podium, a banner that read, "Women Who Start Over." The room filled fast. Women in their 20s and their 60s. A few men quiet in the back, notebooks open, faces attentive. Helen came with me, of course, front row like a lighthouse. When they called my name, I walked to the microphone and felt the old reflex rise, smooth it over, make it easy. But I didn't put on a nice smile. I told the truth. "I'm Olivia," I began, voice steady. And for a long time, I confused peace with silence. The room hushed in that good way, listening with their whole bodies. I didn't name Chloe. I didn't need to. I spoke about the 1,000 small erasures that come before the big ones. About grief making you easy to push because you're already bent. About being the emotional furniture in other people's homes, steady, useful, quiet. And then, I said, letting a breath move through me, someone crossed a line in public, and I had a choice. I could give them the reaction they wanted, or I could keep my dignity. I smiled, I said, and I felt recognition ripple through the audience. Not because I was okay, because I refused to be controlled. I talked about boundaries, about paperwork as protection, about power that isn't loud, power that looks like not replying to bait, like walking away with your head up, like choosing your own morning. When I finished, the applause wasn't explosive. It was steady, deep, the kind that feels like being seen instead of being performed at. During Q&A, a young woman stood, voice shaking. "How do you stop feeling guilty for choosing yourself?" "You don't stop overnight," I told her. "You practice. You choose yourself once, and it feels selfish. You choose yourself again, and it feels unfamiliar. And then one day you realize your peace isn't something you're stealing, it's something you're finally allowing." That's when I noticed her. Second row near the aisle, a woman in a baseball cap pulled low, oversized sunglasses indoors, hoodie collar up like she didn't want her shape recognized. She wasn't listening like everyone else. She was watching me. Major twist #3. Chloe was there in disguise, likely hunting for ammunition, but watching me command the room. She realizes she can't control the narrative anymore. Helen's posture shifted, subtle and protective. For a heartbeat, I considered calling it out, exposing her. But that wasn't my victory. My victory was that I didn't need to chase her. I kept speaking, answered questions, smiled when it was real, let my voice take up space. Afterward, women lined up to talk to me, quiet confessions, trembling gratitude. The organizer asked if I'd consider leading a workshop series. Noor grinned and said, "Also, people keep asking if you sell your ceramics." I laughed, surprised by my own happiness. "I'm working on it." Outside, James waited by the curb. "I saw the live stream," he said, eyes wet. "I get it now. I thought staying quiet kept the peace, but it just kept her comfortable. I wish I'd supported you sooner." "Thank you," I said, because it mattered, even late. He hesitated, then added, voice dropping, "Mom, Chloe was there. I saw her in the parking lot afterward. She didn't know I saw." A cold line ran down my spine. Because if Chloe was hiding and watching, then the thing she claimed would end this wasn't just a bluff. It was already in motion. The weeks after the event stopped feeling like a countdown and started feeling like a season. I still had the hearing date circled on my calendar. Still had Peter's number starred. Still kept my documents in a neat folder like armor, but Chloe no longer lived in my body the way she used to. She didn't get to decide whether I slept, or ate, or breathed freely in my own home. On Monday mornings, I walked the Presidio with Janice and Noor, letting the Bay air fill the places anxiety used to occupy. On Wednesdays, I went back to the pottery studio, hands in clay, the wheel humming under my palms like a heartbeat. I started bringing my pieces home and lining them up on the kitchen counter, bowls, mugs, a slightly crooked vase that made me laugh every time I looked at it. And then people started asking to buy them. At first it was just Noor, "I want that mug, it feels like you." And then it was the organizer from the talk series, and then women I didn't know messaging me through the event page. "Do you ship? Do you do custom? Do you teach?" I didn't call it a business. Not yet. I called it a door opening. Helen helped me set up a simple website at my dining table, both of us leaning over my laptop like teenagers plotting something. She kept saying, "Look at you," with that half-proud, half-amazed tone, like she couldn't believe I'd been sitting on this part of myself all along. My circle widened in a quiet way, supporters who didn't demand I perform gratitude, people who didn't ask me to minimize what happened so they could stay comfortable. Women from the workshop series brought friends. Friends brought sisters. Sisters brought daughters. And suddenly, I wasn't just surviving a family crisis, I was building something that belonged to me. James became part of my life again in a way that felt new and honest. He started coming over on Sundays, not to negotiate or apologize in circles, but to be present. He'd bring groceries and ask what I was working on. He'd sit at the table while I wrapped orders, his hands awkward at first, then steady as he learned the rhythm. He listened when I spoke, really listened like he was making up for years of half hearing me. One afternoon, he watched me pack a box and said, quietly, "I didn't understand how much you were shrinking to keep us all comfortable." I didn't correct him. I didn't make it easier for him. I just nodded. "I'm proud of you," he added, voice thick. "And I'm sorry it took a slap for me to see." That apology didn't erase the past, but it landed somewhere real. Chloe, meanwhile, kept losing rooms. At Sophia's school, parents who used to orbit her drifted away. At charity events, she stopped being asked to lead, then stopped being asked at all. Her posts online got fewer likes, fewer comments, until the glossy pictures started looking like proof of loneliness instead of success. James told me she was staying late at work, which sounded like someone hiding in a place where nobody asked personal questions. He told me she'd started sleeping in the guest room to think, which sounded like someone realizing the bed she'd made had edges. And through all of it, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel so soon. No regrets. Not for protecting my assets. Not for protecting Sophia. Not for choosing silence when Chloe baited me and choosing truth when it mattered. One evening, after Sophia fell asleep on my couch with a book open on her chest, James stood by my window and watched the fog roll in. "She's still trying to find a way to win," he said softly. I looked at my granddaughter's safe, breathing. Small hand curled around a bookmark. "Then let her look," I replied. "I'm not her prize anymore." James's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his face tightened. "It's from her lawyer," he said, voice low. "They're requesting an emergency change before the hearing." The calm in my chest held steady, practiced. But somewhere deep, the warning bell rang again. Because Chloe wasn't done trying to end this. She was just running out of road. Peter met us at the courthouse steps with a folder thick as armor. "Her emergency motion was denied," he told James. "No evidence, and the judge hates the conservatorship angle." Inside, Chloe stood in pale gray beside her lawyer, posture perfect, eyes sharp. When she saw James next to me, her expression tightened, then reset. In court, her attorney leaned on polished phrases. Concern, safety, instability. Chloe played wounded composure. Then Peter stood and turned the room cold. "Witnesses to a public assault," he said. "Photographic injury, and an attempted beneficiary. Change request tied to Miss Stevens' email." Chloe went pale. The judge looked straight at her. "Do you understand how serious a conservatorship request is?" "I was concerned," she said. "Concerned. the judge repeated flatly. Because she protected her assets and refused contact? The mask slipped. Everyone saw it control. I'm denying the restraining order and dismissing the conservatorship request, he ruled. Grandmother contact continues. Interference will be viewed unfavorably. Further misuse may mean sanctions. Outside, James's voice cracked. I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner. You stood now, I said. Weeks later, Chloe withdrew the rest and accepted boundaries. Peace returned in quiet mornings. My ceramics sold out at markets, my workshops filled with women relearning their own power, and I finally knew the truth. They thought they could crush me, but in the end, they were the ones left behind.